Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're looking at something absolutely crucial for all of us living or managing property around Greater Cincinnati: the actual science behind property protection. We're going to look way past those obvious puddles and soggy carpets to understand exactly what it takes to save a building from its worst enemy, water. Seriously, the stakes for our local properties have never been higher, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. If you're around here, you know the drill. You or someone you know has definitely dealt with some nasty water intrusion. But why here? Why is our specific region such a hotspot for this stuff? Well, spoiler alert, it's not just bad luck. It's not just a stray thunderstorm. It's actually a literal perfect storm of environmental and geographical factors uniquely converging right in our backyard.
Think about it. Cincinnati literally sits in a giant geographical bowl. We've got the Ohio River, the Little Miami, and the Mill Creek all coming together. So when those heavy spring rains hit, the water just has nowhere to go. And then combine that bowl effect with Hamilton County's notorious clay-heavy soil, this soil flat out refuses to absorb water quickly. The result? Massive hydrostatic pressure pushing water right against your foundation, leading to persistent basement seepage. Oh, and let's not forget our brutal winter freeze-thaw cycles, right? Temperatures plummet, then spike a few days later. It is the absolute perfect recipe for burst pipes hidden inside your walls before you even realize there's a problem. Now, how these geographical quirks hit you really depends on what neighborhood you're in. We've got this beautiful, fascinating mix of historic architecture and modern builds across the city, which means vulnerabilities are super localized. Take older, packed districts like Over the Rhine or Clifton. Sudden spring storms easily overwhelm those aging storm sewers. Up in historic spots like Mount Adams, the wind whipping off the hills combined with those extreme temperature swings wreaks absolute havoc on older plumbing. And down in the floodplains, places like Lower Price Hill or Sedumsville, overwhelmed drainage means persistent river backups. Actually, a lot of older homes there still have traditional limestone foundations that literally soak up groundwater like a sponge. You have to be incredibly vigilant. But listen, no matter how the water actually gets in, a clock immediately starts ticking. 48 hours. That's it. That is the absolute maximum window you have before dangerous mold starts creeping in. And you know Cincinnati summers, that intense humidity basically acts as a massive incubator. If you don't dry things out fast, a simple plumbing leak turns into a severe biological health hazard in just 2 days. So speed isn't just a preference, it is a scientific necessity. Every single hour counts when structural materials are fully soaked in this climate. Moving on to Section 1, the science of the threat, and specifically understanding water categories. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that water isn't just water. The source of the leak completely dictates how professionals scientifically tackle the problem. The restoration industry breaks it down meticulously into 3 distinct categories. Category 1 is clean water. Think a burst, pristine supply line. Catch it early, and most of it can be saved and totally dried out. Category 2 is gray water. This is your overflowing washing machine or broken dishwasher. It's got a significant level of contamination, so it needs targeted sanitization. But then there's Category 3, black water. We're talking raw sewage backups or heavily contaminated floodwater from the river. This stuff is packed with dangerous pathogens, toxins, and bacteria. You have to immediately rip out porous materials and use heavy-duty disinfection protocols. You absolutely cannot treat a Category 3 disaster with a Category 1 mindset without risking some very serious health consequences. And you know, that categorization is really just the beginning, because the real danger, it's usually not what you're stepping in, it's what you can't see. To the naked eye, water damage looks like a visible puddle pooling on the floor or a totally soggy carpet, but the destructive reality is hidden. It's the moisture trapped tight inside structural cavities behind your painted drywall. It's waterlocked permanently beneath your subflooring. It's that slow-growing mold silently thriving in your dark crawl space, or efflorescence, those weird powdery white salt deposits blooming right on your concrete basement wall. The puddles, those are just a symptom. The actual disease is the hidden moisture quietly eating away at the integrity of the building. Dealing with that hidden disease is exactly why real property restoration requires highly specialized knowledge anchored by something called IICRC certification. That stands for the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. It is basically the absolute gold standard in this industry. When a technician shows up with this, they aren't just someone with a mop and an industrial fan. They are rigorously trained in applied structural drying, advanced moisture behavior, and strict mold prevention protocols. It's what clearly separates true, scientifically backed restoration from a simple cosmetic cleanup that leaves the underlying problems completely untreated. Let's move to Section 2, the solution, and the professional standard of care. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive gap between a homeowner's best DIY efforts and true professional mitigation. Look, if you try to tackle this yourself, you're probably grabbing old towels and a standard wet vac, right? You might get the surface dry, but you're almost certainly going to miss the hidden moisture inside the walls. And bam, that terrifying 48-hour mold explosion we talked about is triggered. Professional restoration is a whole different ballgame. They bring in advanced thermal imaging cameras to literally see cold water trapped behind seemingly dry walls. They use powerful truck-mounted extractors capable of pulling thousands of gallons of water an hour right out of a flooded basement, and they rely on highly calibrated moisture meters every single day to track exactly how things are drying deep inside those building materials.
To actually apply all that high-tech gear effectively, you need a strict chronological process. It kicks off with a 24/7 emergency dispatch. Because let's face it, water doesn't respect business hours, and that clock is always ticking. From there, the response moves lightning fast into comprehensive water extraction and tightly controlled structural drying to lock down the environment before secondary damage ruins everything. And finally, you get to reconstruction. It's a seamless, continuous cycle from a midnight panic all the way to a completely restored property. Plus, the owner gets single-point accountability the whole time, without having to juggle multiple contractors during a crisis. So, the crucial point I want you to remember through all of this is that proper drying takes days, not hours. I mean, sure, the initial extraction of thousands of gallons of standing water happens incredibly rapidly, but the actual structural drying, that requires intense, methodical patience. Especially in a high-humidity climate like ours here in Cincinnati, you need aggressive industrial dehumidification. You just can't rush the science. Technicians have to strategically position specialized air movers based on your building's specific construction and natural airflow patterns. And they rigorously check those calibrated meters daily until the core of the materials return to their natural, normal moisture ranges. Oh, and there is a massive administrative benefit to doing things this scientifically. By utilizing those thermal photos, writing up detailed scope reports, and maintaining daily, precise moisture logs, professionals are actually speaking the exact language that insurance adjusters require. Instead of a stressed homeowner trying to vaguely explain the damage over the phone, this hard scientific documentation proves definitively that industry standards were meticulously followed. It directly translates the physical science of the drying process into the rigorous documentation needed to streamline and maximize your insurance claim. It literally lifts a massive, stressful burden right off your shoulders. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway for anyone living or working in the Ohio River Valley. Knowing our unique, bold geography, that unforgiving clay soil, the aging infrastructure, and that relentless 48-hour mold window, is your property actually truly protected from the next perfect storm? And if the absolute worst happens, do you know exactly who to call to deploy the science necessary to save your investment? Well, thank you so much for exploring the science of water damage with me in this explainer today. Keep your properties dry, and as always, stay curious.